Good evening. Alrighty, I'm going to start off by asking for a favor from all of you and a favor from some of you. Okay, favor from all of you up first. If you're a Bible opener, Isaiah 55. That is favor for all of you. Isaiah 55 is going to be our jumping point. It's going to be our key text. We're going to come back and we're going to look through the first 9 verses of it together. But before we do that, I think for cohesiveness and to get a full understanding of the context, it'll be beneficial for us to read through all 13 verses of it together once through. Come, everyone who thirsts. Come to the waters, and he who has no money, come buy and eat. Come buy wine and milk without money and without price. Why do you spend your money for that which is not bread, and your labor for that which does not satisfy? Listen diligently to me, and eat what is good, and delight yourselves in the rich food. Incline your ear and come to me. Hear, that your soul may live, and I will make with you an everlasting covenant, my steadfast, sure love for David. Behold, I made him a witness to the peoples, and a leader, commander for people. Behold, you shall call a nation that you do not know, and a nation that did not know you shall run to you, because the Lord your God, and of the Holy One of Israel, for he has glorified you. Seek the Lord while he may be found. Call upon him while he is near. Let the wicked forsake his way, and the unrighteous man his thoughts. Let him return to the Lord, that he may have compassion on him, and to our God, for he will abundantly pardon. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. For as the rain and the snow come down from heaven and do not return there, but water the earth, making it bring forth and sprout, giving seed to the sower and bread to the eater, so shall my word be that goes out from my mouth. It shall not return to me empty, but it shall accomplish that which I purpose. It shall succeed in the thing for which I sent it. For you shall go out in joy and be led forth in peace. The mountains and the hills before you shall break forth into singing, and all trees of the field shall clap their hands. Instead of the thorns shall come up from the cypress. Instead of the briar shall come up the myrtle, and shall make a name for the Lord, an everlasting sign that shall not be cut off. Thank you for participating in favor number 1. Now, favor for a few of you. I look around and I see a few of you. The rest of you don't have to listen, but the few of you that do normally read the bulletin and read the bulletin articles, tonight, pretend like you didn't. Now, the rest of you who normally would never open the bulletin and would never read the bulletin articles, you're going to be great at this part. You see, I have a problem, I have a confession. I wrote the bulletin article, and then I wrote this lesson, and I wrote this lesson, and I got to the end of it, and I said, well, that bulletin article would have made a great way to start the first section of this lesson. And I said, well, I can't do that. I already used it. And then I decided there are no rules, and I'm going to do it anyway. So, this past week, I was rereading, for the first time as an adult since high school, Franz Kafka's The Hunger Artist, or A Hunger Artist, or The Starving Artist, depending on the translation in which you are familiar with. It's about a man whose entire life revolves around him not doing one thing: eating. He was a circus performer. He lived in this cage for weeks at a time, and he would not eat. He would starve himself. And day after day, performance after performance, people would come and watch him not eat. And they were amazed because he would grow thin, and he would not eat, and he'd be under surveillance 24/7, and he would not eat, and yet he lived. But eventually, time went on, and people no longer were impressed by the thing in which he did not do, and so they stopped coming. But he continued to not eat. So he sat there and didn't eat, even though nobody was watching, because that's the art he decided to dedicate his life to. And eventually, one day, as a result of not eating, he died. But before he died, he kind of gave away the joke on the matter. When asked why he performed this art, he whispered, "I never found a food that I liked." It wasn't out of artistic integrity. It wasn't out of a devotion to the craft. It was just meaningless. He did not eat because he did not like food. And that's what killed him. And I find that story like a lot of Kafka's work to be both depressing and insightful, and one of those things in which you can look at almost theologically because you don't quite understand what it means on the surface. And I spent my week thinking about that short story. If you haven't read it, you should read it. It's like 6 pages. It won't take much out of your day. It's 15 minutes of your time. And I came away with the idea that a lot of us do what the hunger artists did. We devote ourselves to things that have no meaning. We devote ourselves to things that cause us to waste away. We devote ourselves to things that will not feed us physically or spiritually. And for a lot of us, that will result in death. Or at the very least, a longing for something more. And when I look at Isaiah 55, when I look at the first 2 verses, come everyone who thirsts, come to the waters, and he who has no money, come buy and eat, come buy wine and milk without money, without price. Why do you spend your money for that which is not bread, and your labor for that which does not satisfy? Listen diligently to me and eat what is good, and delight yourselves in rich food. And I see here a call to people who are devoting themselves to something that does not feed them. Now, the context here is that this is written to the people of Israel who are in exile, and they're spending all of their energy on politics and on idols, on these distractions, and God is asking the piercing question to them, why? Why are you doing this? Why are you paying for food that cannot fill you? Why are you devoting your time and your limited resources to these things that will only leave you empty? And it's a great question, and yet I can look at my own life and ask the same question. Why do I do this? Why do I chase these things that don't matter? Why do I chase approval and distraction and money and all of these things that feel good in the moment but leave me feeling hungry? In Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 13, we see a similar statement. For my people have committed 2 evils. They have forsaken me, the fountain of living waters, and they have hewed out cisterns for themselves, broken cisterns that can hold no water. It's about Israel. Again, it's about Israel who turned away from God, looking for idols, and which left them feeling thirsty. And they were looking for these substitutes because they knew, without God, something is missing in my life, so I must fill that hole with something. And they fill that hole with a cistern that doesn't hold any water. So they're left feeling empty. And we do the same thing. I use this example with the teens sometimes that people are broken, right? We're like a boat with leaks. And you got to plug the leaks with something or you're going to drown. And we can plug those leaks with all sorts of things. Now, the right answer of what you should plug those leaks with is God. That's the obvious right answer, and yet that's not what we do most of the time. What we plug the leaks with are things that make us feel good, whether that is alcohol, whether that is money, whether that is addiction, whether that is pride, whether that is something that makes me feel good in the moment. And we keep plugging those holes, and the problem is the more you plug the holes with things that don't actually plug the holes, the more holes you're left with. And you're left in this cycle of plugging holes faster and faster and faster with things that aren't going to hold water. And you're going to sink eventually. And that's what God's asking Israel. Why are you doing that? Why are you trying? You need water, and yet you're using cisterns that are filled with holes that it's not going to hold water. In John chapter 6, Jesus asks a similar question, or he states a similar thing. In verse 27, he says, "Do not work for the food that perishes, but for the food that endures to eternal life, which the Son of Man will give to you. For on him God the Father has set his seal." Jesus says this feeding the 5,000 to the people who were wanting more. And the problem was they were wanting more of what Jesus was giving them, but not what Jesus was offering them. And we're here, a people who are broken, who are in need, who want more. And unfortunately, the more we want, it's not always the more that God is offering. Let's continue in verse 3. Verse 3 of Isaiah 55, "Incline your ear and come to me. Hear that your soul may live. And I will make with you an everlasting covenant, my steadfast, sure love for David. Behold, I made him a witness to the peoples, a leader and a commander for the peoples. Behold, you shall call a nation that you do not know, and a nation that did not know you shall run to you, because of the Lord your God and the Holy One of Israel, for he has glorified you. Incline your ear and come to me." Again, we can tie this in with the first 2 verses, right? Incline your ear and come to me because I'm going to feed you people who do not have money for food. I'm going to give you what you need, and what we need is grace. What we need is mercy. What we need is forgiveness, and God is offering us that without price. Everything in our world today, everything in the 21st century is transactional. Even favors are transactional. I scratch your back, you scratch mine. I want this, well, in order to get this, I have to give that. And even our relationships, I do this for that person because they did that for me. I act as a friend to them because they act as a friend to me. And yet God is offering something that is not transactional because we can't bring anything to the table in order to trade with God. We have nothing that God needs or seeks. And yet he says, come to me, that your soul may live. In Ephesians chapter 2, verses 8 and 9, for by grace you have been saved through faith. And this is not of your own doing. It is the gift of God and not a result of works, so that no one may boast. I know we don't need to hear this, but I'll say it for those who aren't listening. Salvation isn't earned. There is nothing I can do to earn my way into God's good graces. I can't do enough good wills in order to be saved, right? Salvation is something that God offers to me. And it's something that God offers to me for free. And I find it interesting. In Revelation chapter 22, practically the end of the Bible, it ends with this same invitation that Isaiah gives. This same invitation that we see echoed throughout the New Testament. The Spirit and the bride say, come. And let the one who hears say, come. And let the one who is thirsty come. And let the one who desires take the water of life without price. All the way from Israel's exile to the eternity talked about in Revelation, God is offering the same thing for people who are thirsty to come to him. If you are longing, go to God. In verses 6 and 7 of Isaiah 55, he talks about the urgency of this call. Seek the Lord while he may be found. Call upon him while he is near. Let the wicked forsake his way, and the unrighteous man his thoughts. Let him return to the Lord, that he may have compassion on him, and to our God, for he will abundantly pardon. The door of invitation is open now. But as we say all the time, it's not guaranteed forever, right? There's not a guarantee of tomorrow. There's not a guarantee of next week. And I understand that some people thrive on procrastination. Some people don't do good work unless they are on a tight schedule. I understand that. But procrastination is the enemy of repentance, right? Waiting until someday is just another way of saying never. Someday I'll get my act together. Someday I'm going to put this thing aside. Because here's the deal. We all have problems. We all have flaws. We all have temptations. We all have sins that we fall into. And the truth of the matter is most of us know what they are. Most of us know what we need to be better at, and maybe, I'm speaking for the crowd when I mean myself, but a lot of the time, we know what we need to fix, and yet we're not fixing it. Instead, we're saying, well, I need to be better at that, with no intention of actually doing anything about it. We're giving these some days. Someday I'm going to do this. Someday I'm going to do that. Someday I'm going to dedicate my life to God. Someday I'm going to serve in the church. Someday I'm going to read through the entire Bible. Someday. And in reality, what we mean is not now, not today, not while I'm enjoying life. Someday when I'm bored and nothing else matters, maybe I'll work on that. And some days, well, usually they become nevers. In 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 2, for he says, in a favorable time I listened to you. In a day of salvation I have helped you. Behold, now is the favorable time. Behold, now is the day of salvation. Paul here is echoing Isaiah's importance of the matter, right? That the need for an immediate response, that salvation isn't something that you just drift into. Right? You can't just slowly drift into salvation. It's a decision. It is either something you are deciding to do or something you are not deciding to do. It's a response. And if you are not making the decision to respond, well, then you're drifting. And the thing about drifting is I said you can't drift into salvation, but you can drift into a whole bunch of other places. You can drift away from God's grace. You can drift further into sin. You can drift into temptation, into situations in which you don't need to be in, but you're not going to just drift to God by being indecisive. In Hebrews chapter 3, verse 15, as it is said, "Today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as in the rebellion." The thing is, I like that the Hebrew writer here uses the word rebellion. Because when we talk about rebellion today, we think of rebellion as big. It's something you do. There is a rebellion against the government. There's a militia. There's a movement. Rebellions are big and loud and visible. But the truth of the matter is, rebellion of the heart, rebellion against God is rarely big and loud and visible. Surely sometimes, sure, you're going to make a big stink. You're going to make a big fuss. You're going to make sure everybody knows that you're done with this God stuff and you're out of here. But in reality, most of the time, when we're rebelling against God, it's quiet. It's soft. It's that refusal to make a decision. It's indecisiveness. It's drifting. Let's continue in verse 8. "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are my ways your ways, declares the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." Israel seemed to have this problem. And I'm going to blame Israel, and then I'm going to come back to it and say, well, we have the same problem. But Israel had this problem with understanding where God's power came from. You see it throughout the entire Old Testament. They thought God's power came from Mount Sinai, because that's where he was visible to them. They thought God's power came from the Ark of the Covenant, because they knew that when they were in God's good graces and they were carrying the Ark of the Covenant, God protected them. And then they started to try to use it as a magical army item, and it backfired on them. They thought that God's power came from when God gave them big and strong armies, that the power of God was actually the people in which God provided. And well, God proved that wrong. And I think sometimes we do the same thing, that we know God is powerful. We know that God has power over the world around us. And yet, for some reason, we think that we can pinpoint that power. That we can say, well, God is powerful, and God is going to use that power to do X, Y, and Z. Right? God is going to give me the opportunity to talk to so-and-so about X, Y, and Z. God is going to allow for me to do this. God is going to elect the person that I think should be in office so that we as a country can do this. And we think that we can pinpoint God's power to specific instances that look like us, that align with what we want. That's the funny thing about when you start to define God. That when you start to define God, all of a sudden God starts to look a lot like the person defining him. And the reality is, his thoughts are not our thoughts, and his ways are not our ways. And that's great news, because he explains that for us, because his ways are better than our ways, and his thoughts are better than our thoughts. And God's path is often the opposite of what we expected, because, well, sometimes God wants us to learn a lesson. And typically in my life, I haven't learned a lot of lessons from things being easy. So when I'm pinpointing and I'm thinking and I'm praying about how God's going to provide me the opportunity, I don't think about how God is going to provide me the opportunity to struggle. And yet sometimes that's what God provides. God's path doesn't always make sense to us. In Romans chapter 11, verse 33, "Oh, the depth of the riches and the wisdom and knowledge of God, how unsearchable are his judgments and how inscrutable his ways." Paul here is erupting in praise, wrestling with God's mysterious plan for both Jews and Gentiles, something that Paul didn't understand himself while being sent, and yet he sees then that how great and marvelous they are, despite him not understanding it. Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 27 explains, "But God chose what is foolish in the world to shame the wise. God chose what is weak in the world to shame the strong." That what we expect to be strong and what we expect to be mighty, what we expect to work, is not always what God chooses. And that's okay. Because his ways are greater than my ways. And his thoughts are greater than my thoughts. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are his ways more. And then in verses 10 and 11, "For as the rain and the snow come down from heaven and do not return there, but water the earth, making it bring forth and sprout, giving seed to the sower and bread to the eater, so shall my word be that goes out from my mouth. It shall not return to me empty, but it shall accomplish that which I purpose, and it shall succeed in the thing for which it sent." Verse 12, "For you shall go out in joy and be led forth in peace. The mountains and the hills before you shall break forth into singing, and the trees of the field shall clap their hands. Should celebrate, right? That's what that is, right? The mountains and the hills before you shall break forth into singing, and the trees of the field shall clap their hands. That is celebration, that the word of God is going to do what God intends for it to do. And we live in a world that celebrates all sorts of things. We live in a world that celebrates things that which I was going to be politically correct. Hold on, let me rephrase that. We live in a world that celebrates sin. We live in a world that celebrates selfishness. We live in a world that celebrates things that are antithetical to what God values. And so often it is so easy, it's so easy to just go with the flow, to see the world celebrating these things that you know are sinful, and maybe you don't celebrate with them. But, you know, there's a lot of friction with going against the flow. So you don't say anything. And you see the world celebrating and feasting on things that are leaving them spiritually empty. And you don't say anything because you don't want to have another fight with that coworker again. And you see people that you know and people that you love celebrating things that you know are putting their soul in eternal danger, and you don't want to ruin Thanksgiving again. You did this last time and they didn't take it well, so you just don't do it, and you let them feed on things that leave them empty. And in time, the less you say and the less you stand up, well, the more likely you are to then feed on things that leave you feeling empty. Now, maybe you won't be like that one crazy aunt or uncle or cousin or nephew that you know is doing whatever, but you're like, well, promotion at work wouldn't help. I just have to work a little harder. I'll have to make sacrifices. I won't see my family as much. I won't be able to attend worship as often. But, it'll make me feel good. I'll have time. I'll have money to afford the things in which I want. And so we start feeding ourselves in those ways. And the more we feed ourselves in those ways, the less we are celebrating the good news of God, right? The less we are celebrating the gospel, the less we are living joyful, singing moments of praise. So I guess tonight, as we come to a close, I look at Isaiah 55, and I see a couple things. I see a God who wants us to be fed spiritually. I see a God who knows that we are broken and flawed, and he knows that we're going to try to feed on the wrong things. And so he invites us to grace and to mercy and to participation in his goodwill freely. And then I also see the truth that the world that they lived in and the world that we live in are the same. That not everybody's going to accept that call. And I see that we're called to a different life. We're called to a life of compassion. We're called to a life that celebrates God. We're called to a life that is joyful. And yet I ask the question sometimes of myself, do I live that? Do I live that life? And do I live a life of feeding myself with the right things? Or do I, too, chase the things which will leave me feeling empty? And the truth of the matter is, I think I do sometimes. I think I chase after things that are not important. I think all of us do. I think we get caught up in the rat race. We get caught up with keeping up with the Joneses. We get caught up in life, and all of a sudden we devote more time and energy. And I'm not talking about just physical time and physical energy. I'm talking about your thoughts. Because that's where the real battle is, your thoughts, your mind. We spend more time and energy in our thoughts worrying about things that do not matter. So tonight I give a simple invitation. The feast of the world is going to leave you starving. That is God's truth. The feast of the world will leave you starving. God is offering a feast which will fill you spiritually. He is offering you living water. He's offering you the bread of life. We can use whatever metaphor you want, but he is offering something that will last eternally. And we're not promised tomorrow. So if you're here tonight and you're not feeding yourself spiritually, you're eating what the world is feeding you, and you want to change that, then this is the time, right? This is the time. If you haven't yet been baptized into Christ, then this is the time. If you're living a life of sin and you need to talk to somebody about that, you need to confess before the congregation, you need to pray, you need to cry, then this is the time, because the call is urgent. God is offering it for free, but he's not promising us that it'll be there tomorrow. He's not promising us that we'll be here tomorrow. So if you're here tonight and you need anything that the body here at Stewart can help you with, I ask that you come forward as we